Hi, good evening. This is Geoff Ginter with Real Progressives. Thank you for joining me. There's a bunch of things that I want to talk about, and clearly, I want to talk about MMT tonight in particular to answer a certain set of questions. But there's a couple of things I want to get to before we get there. In one of my previous videos, either last week or the week before, I don't remember exactly, I put up a Jake Tapper video. And I just can't stop thinking about it. And a couple of people have brought it up to me, and even Jimmy Dore, did not only on his podcast but also on his video show. Really went into it, and there's a couple of key points I really want to hone in here, just to start things off. So I'm just going to play the video first, and then we're going to talk about it briefly so that we can put things into proper perspective.
Much more is actually much cheaper than the current system that we pay right now.
Is that true? Did a study funded by the Koch brothers actually indicate that Medicare for All would save the American people trillions of dollars?
No, it's not true, at least not according to the author of the study. The study in question is a working paper from the Mercatus Center at George Mason University that looked at the 10-year impact of Senator Sanders' proposed Medicare for All plan. Now, while it's true that the Koch brothers have given millions of dollars to the Mercatus Center at George Mason University, and an AP investigation earlier this year suggested that the Koch brothers do have control and influence over the hiring and firing of professors, we should note, for whatever it's worth, the authors of this study said the Koch brothers did not influence them in any way. We asked Senator...
For whatever it's worth. Well, it's not worth shit, Jake. I'm sorry to tell you, that entire piece is crap. Top to bottom, inside and out, complete crap. You are a news organization. CNN, known the world over. You are a news organization. Fundamentally, you think you'd be able to organize news, disseminate it, investigate it, ask questions. Is it real? Is it not? So here you are, going before the world, and you don't even use CNN. You have to use factcheck.org to fact-check your show. And what do you do? What kind of journalism do you bring to the table with this piece? Well, here is a study that claims one thing. Here is a politician claiming one thing. And the only thing you do is you go to factcheck.org and check with the author of the study. Now, let's unpack this a little bit. I don't mean to give... motives to certain people. But you, even yourself, Jake, go out of your way to make sure that the Mercatus Center is closely associated with the Koch brothers, and don't anyone ever try to tell me that the Koch brothers are pro-Medicare for All. They're not. So you're telling me that the Mercatus Center does a study. You're telling me the Koch brothers have historically, according to AP, given a lot of money to the Mercatus Center. And then you're also in the same breath saying, for whatever it's worth, the author said they had absolutely nothing to do with the study. I was not influenced in any way. Well, how about this? How about the Koch brothers fund the Mercatus Center? Here's the author of the study, does an actual study. Actually shows what it will do. Bernie Sanders picks up on it. The Koch brothers are angry. They come down on the Mercatus Center and the author, and now the author has to disavow what his study actually says. As a journalist, as an organization, pardon me, something in my eye, as a journalist, as an organization dedicated to truth, theoretically, or at the very least, accuracy and complete transparency, you think you would not just simply go to the author of the study and find out from him what the study is supposed to be saying. How about you get independent people looking into the study? How about you actually do some investigative journalism? If not, you're a stenographer. That's all you are. You ask a question of someone, and then all you do is report what they say. You don't even check to find out if what they're saying is true or not. That is not useful. I don't care what the subject is. If that's how you do your business, Jake Tapper, you're full of shit, and you should get off the goddamn airwaves because you're polluting the commentary. You are polluting the minds of the American people. We need facts. We need actual facts. We need verification. And you are providing none of it. You are providing smoke and mirrors. Not to mention the fact that your entire premise is for shit. As we talk about MMT tonight, we're going to find out exactly why it's shit. But even if we should be concerned about how much is going to be spent on Medicare for all and who is going to be doing the paying, the federal government or the American people, even if we're to be concerned about that, your reporting is still shit. Ask real questions. Investigate the veracity of those answers. You did none of that, and you didn't even use the resources of your own organization. You had to use an online verification source, factcheck.org. Didn't even do it yourself. You outsourced that shit. You're full of shit, Jake Tapper. You better smarten up. You really pissed me off. But we'll get back to that in a little bit. But I had a discussion online with someone who wanted to ask me what I thought the flaws of MMT were. And basically, the conversation started off, about taxation, and I explained what it means to have a sovereign government, why we shouldn't be afraid of debt and deficits. And he accepted, or at least he didn't say anything about it. But then he wanted me to tell him what I thought the flaws were of MMT. And that's a very interesting question. What are the flaws? And I said, well, there are no flaws depending upon your definition of flaws and what you think MMT is and what it is not. So tonight I didn't have enough time. It was a crazy week. I'd be there, typing forever, to say what I wanted to say. Thought about doing a short 15-minute video, but then, the wife, the kids, and, work and all the other things that I got going on in my life, and never got around to it. So I thought, okay, fine. I'll do this show instead of doing what I was going to do. I would do this, What is MMT? What is it not? So obviously I think MMT has no flaws, because MMT just is. MMT is a description of currency. And I know there's a lot of people out there that explain MMT, and some people do it incredibly well, and some people don't do it completely. I don't know of anyone that doesn't do it well, but there are some people that do it a little bit piecemeal, and they don't put in what I would consider to be some salient details because of all the complaints that we have about what MMT is. You just want to print money. No, we don't want to just print money. So I want to discuss MMT. What is it? What it is not. First and foremost, MMT is a description of currency. Beyond that, that's really all it is. Now, just once you describe the currency, that leads to a lot of unassailable truths. But MMT is simply a description of currency. It tells us where dollars are born, how it circulates through the economy, and where those dollars go to die, where they meet their final end. And that's it. And from those, as I said, we can, piecemeal a bunch of macroeconomic truths. And that's about as far as it goes, as far as what MMT is. Those that espouse MMT, those that talk about MMT, we definitely have economic prescriptions for what's going on in this country. We know how we would like to apply MMT. But bear in mind, MMT, simply being a description of currency, describes the economic system we have right now. It describes the gold standard, it describes the Eurozone, and it describes the dollars that you have in your pocket right now. So what is MMT? MMT basically says that a sovereign government with a sovereign fiat, non-convertible, free-floating currency can never go broke. It can never become insolvent, and it can never be unable to pay its bills if those bills come due in its own currency. So I want to unpack this a little bit. Back in I think it was 45, 47. I think it was 47. A man by the name of Rummel was the head of the New York Federal Exchange, Federal Reserve. And he wrote an article says that federal taxes for spending are obsolete. And I'm going to describe why he meant that by first describing the gold standard and why we think even in today we need taxes and borrowing to be able to afford things. If you are on a gold standard, if you say that for every dollar you hold, it is actually worth a certain amount of gold, the federal government promises to exchange your dollars for a certain amount of gold. So if I've got $20 and I would rather have gold instead of a paper bill, I go to the Federal Reserve and I exchange it. I think I'm overmodulating my voice. And I go and I exchange it, and they will give me a certain amount of gold. 30 ounces of gold to $1. Well, times that by 20, and that's how much gold I get to take away. So if that's what they're doing, then please understand that they have to make sure that for every dollar they have in circulation, there is a certain amount of gold available. So if everyone all at once wants to be able to exchange their dollars for gold, we got it here. If they spend more money, if they create more dollars than they have in gold reserves, then they have technically devalued the dollar. So they got to be careful. So if we have a situation, for example, we have 200 billion pounds of gold, and the federal government has decided that, and I'll keep the math real simple here. Ellis Willingham does this all the time. I think it's brilliant. Just to keep the math simple. I've got 200 billion pounds of gold, and the U.S. government has decided that $1 is worth 1 pound of gold. Now, please understand, that is the most expensive dollar bill there has ever been. But for the sake of argument, $1, 1 pound of gold. Ergo, 200 billion pounds of gold, I can only have $200 billion in circulation. Anything more than that, I start to devalue the dollar. So if I want to spend more than 200 billion, if I need to fund federal programs, whether it be a war, whether it be a social program, whatever it be, and I need to have more than $200 billion in circulation, but I've only got 200 billion pounds of gold, I need to be able to find other revenue. One of the first things you can do is taxes. I'm going to tax you anyway, and we'll talk about why we tax in a minute. But I'm going to tax you. That was always going to happen. $200 billion in circulation. Let's say I need to spend $220 billion to fund the programs that I need to this year. So I'm going to take $20 billion of your tax money, and I'm going to recirculate that into the population. I will re-spend it. Ergo, I have now spent $220 billion, but it's still only $200 billion in circulation. See how that works? I have now spent more in a given year, but some of that was already created. I just recycled it in. I still only have $200 billion. The gold reserves are now secure. If I need to spend more than that, and I can only tax you so much, if I tax you completely, then no one has any money. I'm not going to do that. But as we know, some people collect money, they hoard money, other people don't have very much. But if I need to spend more, let's say I needed to spend $250 billion, well, I'll tax $20 billion and re-spend it, but I still need to come up with $30 billion more. Well, here's some rich people that aren't doing anything with the money they have. They're just sitting on it. And I say, have a treasury. I will sell you a bond, and I will promise to repay this with interest. They say, thank you very much. It's free money. So I get their $30 billion. I spend it into the economy with an eye to increasing my tax base so that I can repay this bond with the interest when it comes due. But you see, under certain circumstances, under this situation, if I'm going to be spending and my spending is going to outstrip how much gold I have in reserve, I need your taxes. I need to borrow to be able to maintain and defend the gold supply. This is where the thinking that taxes and borrowing fund federal spending, that we need it as revenue to be able to pay for the things that we want, for war, for Medicare, for whatever it happens to be. We need your taxes. The more we need, the more we tax you. But something happened in the early 1930s. We were in the middle of the Depression. FDR comes in and says, man, we have got to be able to get out of this. People are losing their jobs, no wages, no taxes, no income taxes. We're losing tax revenue. We can't just tax people. They don't have it. So we need to be able to do something about that. We need to be able to stimulate the economy. We need people to have jobs so that they can actually produce, so we can actually have an economy. So what does he do? He suspends the gold standard domestically. We no longer promise to exchange your dollars for any amount of gold. Now, $1 is worth $1, and that's it. The dollar is now worth whatever you can buy it for, whatever you can buy with it. So we now get to spend. We no longer are constrained in terms of how big our money supply can be. We need to spend $300 billion? Not a problem. Financially, fiscally speaking, we do have constraints, and I will get to that. So we spend $300 billion, $310 billion, $400 billion, whatever it takes. The idea is that now you get to have a vision of your economy, a vision of your future. What do you want to do? And now you have all the money you will ever need to accomplish it. Your only constraint is inflation. Your only constraint is inflation. That is a reflection of multiple things. One of the more common and easily to understand things is inflation as it pertains to money creation. Is when people have too many dollars and they're chasing too few goods and services. Everyone's got cash, and we can't produce enough goods and services. So everyone is now demanding things. Everyone's all demanding the same stuff. Prices go up. That's inflation as it would relate to money creation. That's what we're all afraid of. We're all afraid of hyperinflation. We can talk about that in a moment. But for the meantime, I want to discuss going off the gold standard and how that frees us up. You understand? We don't have the constraints of a fixed commodity like gold. We could have used silver. We could have used pencils. It doesn't matter. You can only have so much things. And if you're going to peg that to your currency, or peg your currency to that thing, you will always be constrained. You will always have one arm tied behind your back. Always. That's the way it is. And when you need to spend big, when you need to be able to get out of a hole like the Great Depression, like World War II, like anything that requires more output financially than you have in reserves of that finite commodity that you had previously pegged your currency to, you better depeg. And you go non-convertible, free-floating, meaning we float in relative value against other currencies. But with this comes a great amount of freedom. We get to decide what the supply of money is. How much? How much is it going to take to do what we need to do? So MMT is a description of currency. It tells us who creates the currency. And Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution mandates that Congress creates the currency. Only Congress. What banks do is something else entirely. They create debt. They can create money just like the federal government does, but the federal government is new net financial assets every time it spends. It doesn't need your money back, except in taxes. A bank will ask for all that money back plus interest. There's no new net financial assets created when a bank gives you a loan and creates it with keystrokes, just like the federal government does, but it's not currency. It's pegged to currency. So it's two different things. You got to get it straight in your head which one we're talking about. So only Congress creates the currency. Congress will tell you how much a dollar is worth. It used to be worth gold. Now it's not. It's not worth anything intrinsically. It has the value of what you can buy it for. And where does it derive its value from? The third thing, it levies taxes. People say that if we don't, peg our currency to gold, then the money will have no value anymore. Some people are just obsessed with having an intrinsic value. My money must be worth something. It is worth something. It's worth what you can buy for it. A car is worth something. A home is worth something. Food is worth something. Your dollar in and of itself is worth nothing. But it has value because you can use it to purchase things. Why does it have that value? Because the federal government taxes you. Just imagine, the federal government, we create a new government. And this new government says to you, you now owe us a tax obligation. And I said, okay, fine. I owe you taxes. Here's a rubber chicken. Nope, we don't want your goods. We don't want your services. We need your money. Well, I don't have any money. Well, yes, you do. We just created a currency. It's called the U.S. dollar. Well, I don't have any of that. Don't worry about it. I'm the U.S. government, and I need things. I need a military. I need schools. I need roads. I need railways. I need hospitals. I need all manner of things in order that we can function as government and preside over a society. And I'll pay you for all this stuff. Fine. What are you going to pay me in? U.S. dollars. I don't need U.S. dollars. Yes, you do, because 4 times a year, I'm going to ask for a certain amount of that back. It's called taxes. And if you don't have U.S. dollars to pay your taxes, you're going to go to jail. I'm going to go to jail? Well, at the very least, I'm going to garnish your wages. If you don't have any wages for me to garnish, I'll start taking your stuff. If you don't have any stuff, I'll send you to jail. One way or the other, you're going to be punished. So now you need U.S. dollars. Every job you have will be denominated in U.S. dollars because you need it. And the fact that you need it and everyone else needs it, now we can all use it as a very convenient unit of exchange for our goods and services. You can buy a bushel of apples for a couple of bucks. Instead of having to come in with a cow and hawk off a slice to be able to get your fish or whatever, you get to just hand over some cash. So this is how this works. Money creation is the province of the federal government. This is how we function as a society. People that say that taxation is theft. No, it's not theft. People say, I don't want my tax dollars going towards. Don't worry about it. Your tax dollars aren't going towards anything in particular. You understand? If the federal government creates its own currency by law, and you will demand that currency because the federal government will also tax you. If all these things are true, and it is, in what world would that nation need your dollars that it created in the first place, spent into the economy? It's the only way you got that money in the first place. It created it, spent it, you found a little portion of it, now it takes a portion of that back in taxes to make sure that you keep looking for more dollars. That's how it creates the economy. How does that entity need your dollars in order to spend? How does it need your taxes as revenue to spend when it does not have a gold standard any longer? When we had a gold standard, fine. Without a gold standard, we don't need it. Your taxes for revenue are obsolete. This is what Rummel has said. I want to put it up a little bit more closely. As an instrument of fiscal policy, in terms of what taxes are for, as an instrument of fiscal policy to help stabilize the purchasing power of the dollar. Actually, I just realized I didn't actually show you any of that. Yeah. This is what Rummel has said. What taxes are really for? And I'll put it up closer for you now. As an instrument of fiscal policy to help stabilize the purchasing power of the dollar. Well, what does that mean? As an instrument of fiscal policy. Fiscal policy is when the federal government spends. If any of you have ever heard this term, fiscal policy, monetary policy. Fiscal policy is Congress. Monetary policy is the Federal Reserve. Fiscal policy is money creation. Monetary policy is simply shuffling those existing dollars around. That's it. So taxes are really for these things. As an instrument of fiscal policy to help stabilize the purchasing power of the dollar. It creates the dollar. It creates the value for that dollar through taxation. To express public policy in the distribution of wealth and of income, as in the case of the progressive income and estate tax, meaning we have income inequality. The rich have raped the land. They have absolutely taken over. They have so much money that they are able to, with their pocket change, purchase what should never have been for sale in the first place, our democracy. They purchase the Congress. They purchase the media corporations to make sure that we only get to hear what they want us to hear. And that is completely immoral and completely unsustainable. So, do we need to tax the rich? Absolutely. As a matter of public policy. Not for revenue. Remember, to express public policy in the distribution of wealth and income, as in the case of a progressive income and estate tax. Public policy. It is immoral and detrimental to our democracy and our civilization to have such income inequality, to have so much in the hands of so few and so little for everyone else. We don't need their money as revenue. As revenue, it is completely unnecessary. So everyone that says we have to tax the rich, we have to cut the military budget as a means of acquiring the funds to get Medicare for all and college education, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. No. No. Tax the rich. Absolutely. It is a moral imperative to tax the rich for public policy, because income inequality is immoral at the levels it currently is at. But not for revenue's sake. Never for revenue when we're on a free-floating, non-convertible fiat currency. To express public policy in subsidizing or in penalizing various industries and economic groups. I mean, everyone knows this. You know, anyone in any kind of economic progressive sphere understands that when the conservatives cry about welfare for the poor, they are perfectly fine for welfare for the rich. You know, the record-making profits. I mean, I don't even have to put up a meme about this or any kind of news. Everyone understands this. It's been around for decades. Even on the news media that is bought and paid for by these corporations, you'll eventually hear the truth. Corporations, especially in fossil fuels, that make billions of dollars in profits, still get ungodly amounts of money from the federal government. If they make that much profits, why are they getting so much as 5 cents from the federal government? That makes no sense. Unless you understand the politics behind it. That power begets power and money begets money. And once you have both, you just want more. It's about power, it's about control. The rich understand they don't need more money, but more money means more power. More power means they get to do whatever they want, no questions asked. No one goes to jail when they do crime of a vastly more destructive scale than anyone else could ever possibly do. It's about power. It's about being completely unaccountable. And we need to stop that. But we don't need to stop that so that we can have Medicare for all. No. You want to have two fights at the same time? Go for it. But people are dying right now. Tens of thousands because they can't even access health care. Hundreds of thousands because the health care we do have is predicated on a for-profit model. That means they care more about their profits and less about you. So people die, even if they do have insurance, even if they have great insurance. Needlessly. So stop the bleeding. You want to be able to end this. It can't simply be about covering everyone with private insurance. That'll stop the tens of thousands maybe, but what are you going to do about the hundreds of thousands that will be dying because of that system? And you're going to put off saving those lives because you want to be able to tax the rich first? No, you want to do both at the same time. Have at thee. But make sure it's two separate fights. Make sure that you're fighting for public policy. When you tax the rich, it is immoral to have that level of income inequality. But it is also immoral to have healthcare be a for-profit business. It is immoral to have prisons be a for-profit business. It is immoral to have education be for-profit. It is immoral for public goods to be for-profit. Voting machines with... Are you kidding me? Are one universally held common good, the right to vote, in the hands of private corporations. I'm sorry, can't happen. And it is happening, and it has been happening, and it has to stop. But as a matter of fact, as a matter of actual macroeconomic reality, whether you think it's going to happen politically or not, it doesn't matter. As a matter of factual policy, as a matter of factual federal finance, we don't have to change any of these systems before we have the money to be able to get the things that we need to stop dying right now. You can argue that we don't have the political will. Fair enough. Create the political will. But you are wasting time creating political will behind the need to tax the rich and the military and the wars before we do all those other things. You want to tax these people as revenue for these other programs? You're wasting your time and people are dying. You want to have both fights at the same time? Fair enough. God love you and so do I. But if you confuse the two, then the reason for taxing and the ability to spend, people are going to die. And they didn't have to. And this is the point. This is what MMT talks about. The difference between taxing and spending when you're on a free-floating, non-convertible fiat currency. Fiat meaning at will. Fiat meaning we decide the size of the money supply. It is not determined by the scarcity of a finite resource. So to return, to isolate and assess directly the cost of certain national benefits, such as highways and Social Security. So for national programs, the military, Social Security, Medicare, infrastructure, things that we have decided should not be for profit, things that we have decided are not in the best interest of society if they fall into the hands of the capitalist class. The capitalist class, by all means, make your profits at things that are not life and death, at things that are not the difference between good and evil. By all means, make your profits. We will set the rules of the road as the Constitution mandates we are able to. But you will not be able to make profit off of life and death situations, Medicare, health care, education. You're not going to be able to do these things. We don't want for-profit prisons because we want to end incarcerations. We want to be able to change the conditions under which people feel the need to commit crimes. We should also change the conditions under which we categorize things as crimes. We're trying to create a better society, not incarcerate more and more of our people because it is profitable to do so. That is immoral. And taxes allow us the ability to do these things by virtue of being able to tax, by forcing you to need this currency. It gives that currency value. And because it has value, now the federal government can spend. And you will accept it as payment because you need it in taxes. And we can use this currency to do the public good. So these are the reasons for taxing. Now, someone mentioned to me today, about this particular story. And it's funny, it's laughable, it's horrific, all at the same time. So here's a story from online. The economic advisor was astounded when Trump told him to print money to eliminate federal debt. That's funny. I got to admit, that's funny. And someone said, well, you understand MMT. Is he right? Can we do that? And I responded briefly, he's right and he's wrong. And it's very important to understand why he's right, and it's very important to understand why he's wrong. So let's just continue with what he says. President Trump suggested to his chief economic advisor, Gary Cohn, last year that the government should print more money to help eliminate federal debt, according to an excerpt from veteran journalist Bob Woodward's new book, Fear, Trump in the White House. And, I understand, why they're so up in arms about that. What is he talking about? We should just go borrow a lot of money, hold it, and then sell it to make money, Trump reportedly said in response. Woodward writes that Cohen was reportedly astounded by Trump's suggestion, which he reportedly said illustrated a lack of basic understanding about how federal debt works. Can you tell me the truth? Oh, my God. Yes, it does. He says, just run the presses. Print money, Trump suggested. Okay. That's... Okay, so why is he right? He's right because it shows that he understands that the federal government creates the currency. I prefer to not use terms like print the money. It's not technically accurate. When the money that you have is just a reflection of the people demanding cash on hand. All the money that's printed is printed because banks believe that their customers want cash on hand. And let's face it, some people do want cash on hand. I haven't had cash on hand in forever. I use my plastic for everything. But many people like cash. So cash gets printed. Banks request it. The Federal Reserve will instruct the Treasury to print it, and it will get to the banks. And when you want it, it'll be available to you. Check out Ellis Winningham. He has excellent explanations on money creation. But what this article shows is that Trump understands that the federal government creates the currency. Article 1, Section 8, it is very clear. They create the currency. Where he is wrong, you need to understand what the debt and the deficit are. The debt is simply the difference between how much money the federal government spends in a year versus how much it expects to take back in taxes. It's going to spend $2 trillion this year? Fine. And it's only going to take back, $1.5 trillion. So technically speaking, the government now has a $500 billion deficit. They spent more than they took back in taxes. But they don't need your taxes as revenue. They create the currency. It's not backed by gold. We aren't concerned about how much we have in gold reserves. So who the hell cares? The deficit is nothing scary. What matters is where that deficit was spent. Was it spent on infrastructure, on education, on healthcare? Was it spent on things that would stimulate the actual economy by putting money in the hands of those who would spend it? Or did it simply go to the already incredibly wealthy, where they will sit on it, use it to buy back shares of their own companies, make themselves even richer, exacerbate income inequality? Doesn't really do much of anything for the actual economy. Not much, if anything. So the size of the deficit is not so much the question. Where was it spent? That is the question. That's the deficit. The debt is the entirety of the money supply. Everything that the government has ever created that has not been taken back in taxes. So yes, that includes all the treasury securities, the ones that have been purchased by individuals, by the government itself, by private corporations, by private citizens, and yes, by China and Japan and England and all these other foreign nations. They technically hold America's debt because these are tax liabilities, tax credits. But what's the big deal? The federal government spent it into existence. It wound up in the hands of people that now had excess cash. The Treasury sold a bond. They bought it with existing U.S. dollars. And it sits there. It's not revenue anymore. It sits there, and once it's done, we put it back, give it back to you, mark it up with keystrokes for the added interest. You tell me what's scary about that. It's not money that we have to somehow go looking for more of. We create it. That's it. When you are in debt, when you go to a bank and you get out a loan, you're on the hook for all of it. You do have to find the money to pay it back, all of it, plus the interest. But when someone buys a treasury security, they already have the money. They earned it already, or stole it, or did whatever, but they already had it. It's in their bank account. And their bank has an account at the Federal Reserve. You want to buy a treasury security? They transfer from your checking account at the Federal Reserve, transfer it into another account, a savings account at the Federal Reserve. That is you buying a securities, a treasury security, a bond. You just bought it with money that the federal government created, that you earned, and you had in a checking account that you weren't doing anything with. So you decided to purchase a treasury security. And once it becomes due, they will transfer it back electronically, little keystrokes, back into your checking account and mark it up with the extra interest. It's not tax dollars. So what is scary? The deficit is the difference between how much they spend versus how much they take in. Not on a gold standard, not scary. The debt is how much they have actually spent entirely over the course of history that has not yet been taken back in taxes. Not scary. Not off of a gold standard. So Trump thinks that we can print money so we can pay off the debt. But remember, the debt is the entirety of the money supply. That includes treasury securities, your bank account, the money you have in your pocket right now. It's all of it. You want to pay off the national debt? No one has any money anymore. You want to stop selling bonds? Fair enough. Stop selling bonds. We don't need it for fiscal policy. We use it for monetary policy. Remember, fiscal policy is money creation by Congress. Monetary policy is the Federal Reserve. Remember what happens. Existing dollars in the economy, someone has it, they don't need it, they purchase a security, and then when it's due, goes back. And it gets marked up with the interest. That is not on the orders of the Federal Reserve. That is on the orders of Congress. Congress is in control. So remember, monetary policy is just moving things around. Fiscal policy creates the money. Monetary policy moves it around. You don't like the federal debt? Fine, stop selling bonds. Tell Congress to stop selling bonds because it upsets you. It upsets you to see that number get bigger and bigger and bigger. But the number has been getting bigger and bigger and bigger for decades, and nothing bad has happened, except that the oligarchs, they understand MMT. They use MMT because this is the system we have right now. And they have used it to their benefit because they understand it. And the reason that you hear from politicians and from pundits on TV that we need to tax and borrow to be able to spend is because if you understood the truth like they do, you would demand programs for yourself. And if we had Medicare for all, you're no longer a slave. You are no longer tied to a job that you hate because you need the health care. If we have a federal job guarantee, you are even further free because you don't need to be able to be treated shit. You can just simply go get the federal job guarantee. If everyone had a free education, you would be even freer to be able to pursue your dreams, to be able to pursue your ideas, to be the entrepreneur that we're always told we need to be. This is freedom. The problem is that it's freedom for us. They get off on making sure that we are economically insecure, because then we will do whatever they tell us to do. We need them, according to them. No, they need us. And they have convinced us that it's the other way around. So where are the flaws in MMT? MMT just is. It's a factual accounting of what is. Our only constraint is inflation. Do we have the things to do what we want to do? Medicare for all. Do we have the infrastructure in hospitals and clinics, in doctors and nurses and technicians, in pharmaceutical companies ready to dispense medications, in medical manufacturing companies ready to dispense necessary equipment? Do we have everything we would need to support a population that wants to have all their medical care taken care of? If we do, the federal government simply does it, and it's not inflationary. If we don't have these things, the question now becomes, can we marshal our resources to get them? Do we have to educate more doctors? Do we have to build more hospitals? If the answer is yes, can we marshal our resources and do it? Can we? Yes. So let's do that. And by the time we're done, we'll have Medicare for all. These are the kinds of questions we need to be asking. But we're so tied up in asking, can we afford it? How expensive is it going to be? Because they want you afraid of the fact that you will be the one having to flip the bill. It's not you. It's public money. Money creation by the federal government. And who is the government? We, the people. Not we, the oligarchs. Not we, the corporations. That's you and me. So what is the fundamental flaw of MMT? There are none. But the flaw is in us. Because if we want the things that we want, if we claim to say that we want a more just society, we have to demand justice. If we want a healthy society, we have to demand health. Stop subsidizing all this shit, all this crap that finds its way into our grocery stores, and start financing health. Stop subsidizing fossil fuel industries that is destroying our environment and industrialized farming that is destroying our environment, and start subsidizing organic food. Start researching into newer technologies to make sure that we can feed the same people with less amounts of land and water. Start demanding that we change the grid to 100% green energy right now. I don't care how efficient it is. I care if it can get the job done, and it can. And the only thing between us and that reality is a certain amount of money, and the federal government can create it at will. So let's marshal our resources away from fossil fuels and towards green energy. And the minute you understand that the only thing separating what we have now from the reality we want to get to is a political decision to create money, not a political battle to wrest that money from someone who has it. We don't need their money to get green energy. We don't need their money to get Medicare for all. We need their money to be taken away and done nothing with. We don't fucking need it. But we need them to have less of it. Because like petulant children, they're going around stomping on the earth, ruining our natural wonders, ruining our resources, going into our national parks and saying, there's some wonderful energy under there, let's go get some. Not because we need it for civilization, but because it would be profitable for them, but because they're always looking to make the next buck to be able to make sure that they have more power. We need to take away their money to make it harder for them to do damage. We don't need to take their money so that we can have it to spend. So do you understand where the flaw is? We need to be engaged. We need to be involved. We need to make sure that we send people to Congress, to our state houses, who understand how federal finances work. You work in the state house, demand Congress to fund education 100%. No more property taxes for our education. That would free up the state budget to do so many things. So it's important that your state representatives understand MMT so they know how to push their federal government, how to lobby their federal government. Make sure that you send people to Congress that understand this. The flaw in MMT is not in MMT itself. The flaw is in you and me. Are we waking up? Do we understand what is going to be required of us consistently, forever into the future? Because what happens when we allow government to just go on its own in the hopes that we'll send people there and believe that they'll just do good things? We get oligarchs in charge. You and I are not currently in charge, but we had better start getting in charge. That's the fundamental flaw. We get bombing in Palestine, and we subsidize that. We get the worst famine and bombing in the world, in the history of the world, in Yemen, and we subsidize that. People are too busy saying, well, it's all just socialism. What about Weimar Germany? Look at Venezuela. You fucking don't understand federal finance, and you don't understand the actual situations in those countries. You don't understand what it means to have a free-floating fiat currency not backed by any other commodity. To not have your debts denominated in a foreign currency like Venezuela, like in Weimar Germany. To have your productive capacity decimated like in Zimbabwe and Germany. You have to understand the whole picture. You can't just simply see a horrible situation, see people walking around with barrels full of money and thinking the barrels full of money is what created the problem. And if you want to be able to find out what is really going on, I can give you the primer. I can tell you a lot of things, and I put a lot of links in this live stream. A lot of articles, a lot of videos. But you really want to start getting familiar with these people. You want to start listening to Warren Mosler. He's the father of MMT. He's a wonderful economist. You want to talk to a bunch of PhD economists. Stephanie Kelton gave me my big aha moment. A couple of her videos are up there. Randy Ray, Pavlina Chernova, Bill Mitchell, Stephen Hale, Fidel Kaboob, Scott Fulweiler. These people are amazing. They will open your eyes to a wide variety of possibilities. Ellis Winningham, Mike Norman, Rohan Gray. These are amazing economists. These people are at least very economically literate. They'll be able to give you a lot of information. You want to find out what happened in Zimbabwe? They can tell you. You want to find out what happened in Venezuela? They can tell you so that you can turn around the next time someone says, well, this is what socialism gets you. No, that's not what socialism gets you. That's what happens when you come out the other end of a war. That's what happens when you come out the other end of destroying your productive capacity with stupid political choices. You have to understand the difference between political reality and macroeconomic reality. And we can do that. The flaw in MMT is us. We need to look to our resources. We need to preserve our resources. We need to use the power of the purse to further scientific research to make sure that we can have a productive society, that we can have goods and services and still use less and less of our resources. We can do that. The discoveries are out there. They simply need subsidizing, not fossil fuels. Subsidize science that will actually benefit mankind, that will look to our future and give us something we can be proud of. I know I probably shouldn't do this, but I just want to show a little bit of Stephanie Kelton, because she will explain things better than I will.
I'm going to give you the thumbnail version of the history here. Okay, when Britain colonized Africa, what happened? They sail over, hop off the boat, I'm taking some liberties, have a look around and say, gee, there are some really interesting things here that we don't have back home. We sure would like to have some of them. How's about we buy them from you, right? Offering up British pounds in payment. And the Africans said what? Cheerio, safe trip home. No, thank you. Right? Why would we want to give up our resources? Why would we hand our stuff over to you in exchange for this paper? Well, lovely. I mean, the Queen looks lovely and all, but we're really not interested in this swap. So what did Britain do? I don't think you understand. See, what we're setting up here is a colony, and you're going to need to make payment to the Crown, okay? And the payments will be due in British pounds. Oh dear, we don't have any British pounds. How can we pay the tax to the Crown? We can help you with that. We can help you with that. All you have to do is sell us some of this cool stuff we were admiring. We'll pay you, and now you'll have the currency to settle your obligation to the Crown. See how easy it is to monetize an economy that wasn't previously using money? The tax gets value, didn't have any value at first, gets its value by virtue of the fact that you now need it to keep your head, right? So these are the benefits of retaining your sovereign money. The government can never go broke. It doesn't make sense to use that language. It can afford to buy whatever is for sale in the domestic unit of account. So whatever people are trying to sell in order to get pounds is theoretically the limit to what the British government can afford. What is for sale in pounds? Okay? It doesn't need to borrow its own currency, and it can always set the interest rate that it chooses to pay on any money that it does borrow, because borrowing is an option. Okay? I almost brought my props, but I knew I wouldn't have time. This gives a country additional policy space. It allows you to run better fiscal policy to manage your economy. Okay, what happened in the Eurozone? Complete, because we need the money, obviously. We're the sole manufacturer of the currency. Why would we tax to get it? We create it, we issue it. Okay, so taxes do other stuff. They allow the government to spend money into the economy without inflating the economy, without causing inflation. If I want to spend $1 trillion into the economy on infrastructure, and I say, I don't need the revenue, so I'm not going to tax anything out, holy moly, you might get an inflation problem just spending $1 trillion in. So the question becomes, how much can you safely spend to mobilize resources that are currently unused, right? Unemployment. You have construction workers, architects, engineers, you have steel, you have concrete, you have machinery that's not being used by anyone in the economy. So you're not going to crowd it out. You say, aha, I'm going to spend hiring these construction workers, that engineer, that architect. I'm going to take these machines that move heavy stuff and make concrete. I'm going to hire all these things, and I'm going to spend on that. And if I try to do too much, I'm going to get an inflation problem. So I'm going to have to pull some income out of the economy, tax some money out in order to guard against the risk of inflation. So taxes do that. Taxes are important because they help redistribute income. They take income away from people if you think they have too much. So taxes play an important role there. They incentivize or disincentivize behaviors. You might provide tax incentives to encourage people to drive electric cars, or to discourage people from smoking or eating too much sugar or whatever. So taxes do important things, but Rummel's point was you don't need them in order to raise revenue. That's not what they do. Okay,
So I just wanted to put those videos out there because she does an amazing job of describing what I've just been talking about. Taxes are incredibly important. They do a wide variety of good things. And if used properly by people that actually care about the whole economy and the whole amount of people in the country, we can do amazing things. We are not financially constrained. We are resource constrained. And we need to all wake up to this so that we can ask for the changes that we so desperately need. I'm going to leave it there. I'm going to be speaking in Toms River, New Jersey on September 15th. There will be a rally for peace. I urge anyone that's in the area, to come out. We need a big crowd. We need peace. We don't need to ever confuse that with quiet. In order to get peace, sometimes you got to be loud. Sometimes you got to make people uncomfortable. But decisions are made by those who show up. Remember, the flaw of MMT is you and me. The rich and powerful already know all about it, and they have been using it to their advantage and to our detriment and death. So we need to switch that around. And we need to do whatever we need to do, short of violence, to be able to make sure that we send people to Congress who understand it and are willing to do it. Don't ask. Insist. I want a free Palestine. I want a dual state. You can be a Zionist and still want a free Palestine. Israel can always have a home, but it can't have that home if the cost of it is the genocide of an entire people. I understand they have enemies all over. We can work on that. But Palestine must be free. Yemen must be free. Syria must be free. Iraq, Afghanistan, we have got to stop doing what we're doing. We are creating more harm in the world. Decisions are made by those who show up. So show up at the Peace March. Demand peace. You know why? Because we can afford it. We don't need the largest military in the world. We have the largest military in the world because it's profitable for a very few people. We can do better. We'll talk about that on Saturday. I hope to see you there. In the meantime, take care of one another. Take care of yourselves. Find self-love so that you can love others with greater passion. I love you all very much. And I will see you next week. Take care.